So welcome to our Vancouver DevOps Meetup. My name is Andrzej Kamiński, and together with Willie and Martin, I'm co-organizer of this event. In DevOps, ability to monitor production systems and making sense out of the thousands of signals and forecasting behavior from those signals is critical to any organization's stability of systems and reliability. And especially if you got dedicated teams to that, like SREs, for example. So a couple of years ago, DORA, DevOps Research and Assessment, developed a set of metrics. 4 of them are very well known, but there is many more. So if you didn't have opportunity to look at them, I would encourage you to have a look. Also, there isn't potentially an issue. I think that some of those metrics might be a little bit controversial. And the reason why I say this is because often they are not independent. So, for example, deployment frequency or change failure rate are closely related. And if they are used as absolute numbers, that might not really make a lot of sense. But when they are used in combinational relation to each other, definitely. So the bottom line is that we have to understand why and what we are trying to measure rather than blindly following the metrics. But setting up those metrics requires understanding of why and what we try to measure, but also the knowledge to interpret those numbers. Additionally, well, it's time consuming and potentially could be disruptive. So let's see today if there is a way to simplify that, make it a little bit easier. So Martin, over to you. Please introduce our speaker.
Yeah, Andrea, I think Martin just fell off his chair.
I think he doesn't find the unmute button.
I'll introduce Andreas in a second. But
thanks, Willie.
Take a breath, Martin. Yeah, I just want to remind everybody the session is being recorded and will be shared on our Meetup YouTube channel in about a month's time. I put the link into the chat. Please mute your microphones during the presentation and remember to unmute for Q&A. Today's session will have natural pauses for interactive questions. You can also raise your hand or type your questions in the chat to get Andreas's attention. So remember, we need your feedback to improve the meetup and your ideas for future sessions. And note there is an interesting event in May here in Vancouver, bringing CDCon and GitOpsCon communities together. Again, we'll share the link in the chat during Andreas's presentation. And now for the main attraction. I'm excited to introduce Andreas Grabner, who is joining us at 3 o'clock in the morning, all the way from Europe. Andreas has 20+ years of experience as a software developer, tester, architect, and is an advocate for high-performing cloud-scale applications. He is a regular contributor to the DevOps community, a frequent speaker at technology conferences, and regularly publishes articles on blog dynatrace.com. He's passionate about all he does in life. Professionally, it means helping people write better software. Personally, it's salsa dancing. So Andreas, guten Morgen. The stage is all yours.
Yeah, guten Morgen from Österreich. Welcome from Austria. Just a clarification about Austria, not Australia. I always have to make this joke because sometimes I think the best sold tourist item in Austria is a shirt that says "No kangaroos in Austria." So if you ever make it to Austria, then get one of these shirts.
And it shouldn't be Grüß Gott.
Grüß Gott, yeah, or Christi. So it's Austria is very funny because we have a very special dialect. We always say it's the more romantic version of German because we know German is very harsh. Austria is more the romantic version of German. So yeah, thank you everybody also for the nice introduction. As you can see, 3 o'clock in the morning, my time, I get up because I really love my work and I love to represent the DevOps community. Today, I will be mainly talking about Keptn, our CNCF Cloud Native Computing Foundation project. Now, let's actually get started. I I want to find the share button. Here we go. Share screen number 2 in my case. Here we go. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Yeah, perfect. So we have about 45 minutes, I think, with some Q&A. All the details you, I think, need to know about me should be on this slide, right? I do work for Dynatrace per day, and at night, as you can see, I work for, I'm a DevRel, so developer relationships and maintainer of the open source project Keptn. You can follow me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Also, the Keptn details here, it's called @Keptn Projects. As Dynatrace, we are participating and driving multiple different open source projects. I will cover some of them today. OpenTelemetry, in case you have not heard about it. We've also driven Open Feature, which is a very important project for us. So just to let you know, Open Feature basically tries to do what OpenTelemetry has done for observability. We want to standardize the way engineers are building feature flagging into their applications. So providing a standard to implement feature flags. In case this is of interest, check out openfeature.dev. Keptn is going to be the main topic of today. That's also why I highlighted it here. Now, you have mentioned earlier GitOps Con and CDCon that is happening in May. One of my colleagues who is also on the call, Adam Gardner, he also has his video camera on, if you may want to wave. He's from the Austria that actually has kangaroos, so from Australia, and he will be flying to Vancouver. Adam, I think you have a keynote at GitOps Con and a breakout. And as I said, I'll try to do my best to also make it over there. But one of us will make it over there, and hopefully you have a chance to then meet us. All right. Don't deploy into the dark. DORA Metrics for Kubernetes. Lengthy title. To keep you motivated to stay until the end, there's going to be a quiz at the end to Apple AirPods, right? I will have a couple of questions prepared at the end, so stay until the end. I heard, obviously, it's late at night. Feel free to open up the beverage of your choice, but pace yourself because, there's certain questions that you need to pay attention throughout the course. They're sponsored by Dynatrace, so in case you don't know, have never heard about Dynatrace, I started with Dynatrace 15 years ago. And I'm still here, still passionate, getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning doing these chats because I really believe in the cause of Dynatrace. And our cause is, we know the world runs and depends on software. And Dynatrace, we help the software to run perfectly because nobody likes if software doesn't work perfectly. That means we couldn't do meetings like this. We couldn't book flights. We couldn't get our paychecks. There's so many things we couldn't do if software doesn't run perfectly. And we are in the observability space, so we help you figure out how your software runs, where it doesn't run perfectly. We are ingesting and giving you observability from the first commit until production. So that's about Dynatrace. Now, I want to learn a little bit more about you. So what I have prepared is a Slido. Hopefully you've heard about Slido. It's nothing scary. If you are not slide.com, Slido. See, I made a typo, so let me quickly fix this and also send you the link. It is slido.com. That's the first thing I want to fix here. And the second thing I want to do is I want to also paste the link in the chat. So you can go to slido.com and then enter 3345756, or just look at the link that I posted in the chat. I have a couple of questions to just get to know the audience a little bit better. And the first question should say, what has triggered your interest for today's meetup? Is it DORA? Is it Keptn? Is it observability, Kubernetes, delivery pipelines? You're just here for the AirPods. That's also fair, right? Be honest. Or sorry, you're in the wrong meeting. Like that's also sometimes possible if too many meetings pop up. So let's give it a couple of seconds. I see 10 answers so far. And if the right answer is missing because you're here for a completely different purpose, then feel free to also just let me know through the chat. All right, but it seems that DORA has 55. So observability, that's great to know. Observability is 100%. And delivery pipelines is big. That tells me you are probably either responsible for delivery pipelines or you're struggling with your delivery pipelines and you want to find a better way. All right, so I will open up a new poll. Thank you for this. I'll give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and this one poll is closed. Let me open up the next one. So hopefully the screen refreshes, and if it doesn't, what the question should be is, have you heard about the DORA metrics before? And as you can see here, I want to teach you more than just technology today. I also want to teach you some Austrian. You can say yes. In Austrian, we say Ekloa. So that's the more romantic version of ja. So Ekloa. No, if you've never heard about it. In Austria, it's not nein. That would be German. In Austrian, it is na. So very more softer, more romantic. And maybe could be in Austria, it's kann sein. In German, it's vielleicht, but in Austrian, it's just more kann sein. All right. At least I see some smiles. So it seems to, like my mission is accomplished.
And
We
the
use
reason
that
is
in
because
Canada too.
Say it again. What was that?
I spent several years in Austria, so that's why I'm smiling. Because
Yeah.
I know that the romantic part from Vorarlberg.
Yeah, that's nice. So for Vorarlberg, also a little geography lesson. That's the western part of Austria. It's basically connecting Austria to Switzerland. And we were joking about this because the people in that region, I was wondering, are they consider themselves Austrian or Swiss? I think most of them probably work in Swiss, get the Swiss money, but then live in Austria and just pay the Austrian taxes, which is a good place to be in. All right, so 50% have heard about DORA, 47 not, so that should be educational. And the last one, I will close this poll in 3, 2, 1. And let me open up another one. The last question that I have you heard about Keptn before? And you can now practice your German skills because Ekloa and Na hopefully tells you, remember Ekloa is yes and Na is no. But I have a little nuance there. We've used it, not used it, never heard about it. All right. Good. Looks like I'm in the right spot to actually educate you on Keptn and grow the Keptn community, because there's a lot of people that have not heard about us yet. All right, I'll keep that one open, but I will go back to my slides now. So let's get started. First of all, what is DORA? Andre, you already did a great introduction, right? DORA comes from the DevOps Research and Assessment Institute. They got kind of acquired by Google a couple of years ago. For me, the way I always explain it, DORA is one of the options to justify whether your investment in DevOps and SRE has actually paid off, because we've invested a lot of years in DevOps, and then sometimes organizations ask, so we've spent this amount of dollars or euros or whatever currency you trade in your DevOps transformation, you got new titles, you got new shiny tools, but what's the ROI on all of this? And I think one way of measuring it is to look at the DORA metrics. And Andre, you had already done a nice introduction. And I also completely agree with you. Just looking at these metrics individually doesn't give you anything. Deployment frequency, just increasing frequency and say, hey, we went from 1 deployment a year to 1,000 deployments per year, doesn't give you anything if the deployments don't provide any value to your end users, if they did not increase the quality. Also, and this is one piece I will talk about, when we just measure how many deployment changes you have done, right? If you think about, we broke monoliths into microservices, and now instead of deploying one big one, you may have 100 deployments. It still means you may have only pushed out one big change for your end users, while you have a deployment frequency that is much higher because you just have many more pieces. So you need a little more context for it. But I think the DevOps, the DORA metrics are a great way to measure your DevOps efficiency, and especially over time, you see your trends. Do we increase deployment efficiency? How long does it take us to get a change from code commit, from idea into production? How many changes are causing a problem in production? And if we have a problem, how long does it take us to restore the service? There's different tools, different blogs out there that talk a lot about this. Besides DORA, there's also another interesting framework. It's called SPACE, the SPACE metrics. they talk more about engineering efficiency and engineering happiness. So in case you come across DORA, also look for SPACE, S-P-A-C-E, like the space, another interesting set of metrics. Now, from a DORA perspective, right, there is Google years ago, they brought up and came up with a blueprint of actually getting your DORA metrics for your environment. If you search for Google 4-keys blueprint, or if you're following the link on the bottom, it's easy to get. It really explains from left to right, from your tooling that you have, what type of data you need to push it into the backend system of Google. Right? It's obviously a reference implementation from Google, and it does a good job, but it also comes with challenges. The challenging things that I want to talk about today is that their approach has, first of all, you need to somehow figure out how do you get access to all of the data in your existing pipelines, in your existing toolings. I'm pretty sure you're working for some very large organizations. That means you don't only have one pipeline, you have multiple pipelines across multiple different tools. So the question is, how do you get all of this data from all of these different tools into one backend system? Also, what is missing here, what I see missing, is often the application context, right? As you're breaking up monoliths into microservices, just looking at how many services did we deploy and we lose the application context, it gives us data, but without the application context. And Andre, to your point, it's a little hard to say, are we really getting better or are we getting worse? The next challenge I see is based on the Google blueprint, is they are proposing to store all of this, obviously in Google, right? Big data, big query tables and derived tables. They have a great architecture reference, but it's a custom data store. And they also have, based on the blueprint implementation, custom dashboarding. In 2023, this should no longer be the case because we have standards on observability, standards on where we store the data, how we retrieve the data, whether it's OpenTelemetry, Prometheus, and others. Most of you probably have your own observability platform anyway, whether it's Dynatrace or something else. So we should leverage this and not build yet another data silo. So these are some of the challenges. Now, what have we done and why am I here today? What we have done, I want to say hello, Keptn. We bring automated observability into all of your Kubernetes deployments. Now, granted, we are focusing on Kubernetes because Kubernetes is the future platform for, I would say, most of us. So we are focusing on Kubernetes. If you want to learn more about Keptn, Keptn.sh is a great way to start. How this works, and this is just the high-level overview, and I will go into the details in a second. So we assume, or I assume, you have some type of GitOps tools. You're using GitHub, Argo, Flux, GitLab, Azure DevOps, whatever you have your Kubernetes clusters where you deploy into. You have your existing observability tool. And what we bring to the table is the following. You can install Keptn on your clusters. Keptn is implemented as a Kubernetes operator. If you're not familiar with that term, it basically is a piece of software that you install on Kubernetes that is then able to monitor and ingest itself when things happen on Kubernetes. So we actually get to learn when deployments happen. Then the only thing you need to do is you need to add a couple of additional metadata. So your developers can say, I want my deployment to be monitored by Keptn, to be observed by Keptn. And once you then commit your changes, every time your developers push something out and your GitOps tool is pushing the changes to Kubernetes, then what we do from a Keptn side, we automatically create metrics. So when does something get deployed? We have an application, we are application aware. So we can actually tell you, is one service deployed, are 10 services deployed, and do these 10 services belong together to one application? So we give you metrics, but also traces. So what does this mean? We are doing this using open observability standards like OpenTelemetry and Prometheus. So what I will show you later in my demo, you automatically, just by installing Keptn on your target platform, whether this is your dev cluster, your QA cluster, your production cluster, you automatically get your core DevOps metrics, either in Grafana or in Dynatrace or any other tool that you have. You pick your observability tool because we are basing all of this on an open observability standard. And what we also provide is we are also providing end-to-end traces. So if you are familiar with distributed tracing is typically used to trace a request from an end user against your app from the browser all the way to the database or to the mainframe, whatever it is. That's what we've been doing at Dynatrace for the last 15 years since I've been there. But we are now also using OpenTelemetry to trace the deployment from Git commit all the way into production, so that you actually know, why did the deployment take a minute or 10 minutes? What actually happened? Did we deploy one service or 5 or 50 services, part of an application? Where did it fail? Where did Kubernetes take time? So it really gives you insights end to end into your deployments. And this happens fully automatically because we sit in your target platform instead of taking the approach of needing to expand and put plugins into all of your deployment tools and get this data out of your deployment tools, because we know in the end you're all deploying into Kubernetes. So we're doing this the Kubernetes native and the cloud native way. So before I go on, I want to just, as I said, there will be some natural pauses. I want to take a sip of my beverage here. I'm not telling you what's in here. It might be water, but it might be Austrian water. We'll see what it is. If there's any questions so far, I just want to give you a quick chance.
So Andy, it's Jamie Wooster here in Fort Langley, BC, which is a little bit ways from Austria. I'm trying to figure out, with everything you just said, and man, you said a ton of stuff in a very short period of time. What's the benefit to everything you just said, and particularly as it relates to Dynatrace at Perform 2023 and the announcements relating to Grail? And for the people that are on the video call, I mean, WorkSafe's a customer. I don't know if ICBC's here. I don't know if BCLC's here. But there's a number of people that are customers and prospects on the call. And at Perform 2023, we announced a whole bunch of, I'm going to say stuff because I'm going to try to be politically correct. It was off the chart in terms of the things that the industry, that the customers are going through. So, and I'm going to pause and let you.
Yeah. So the reason why I know we all are passionate about Dynatrace, and today my main focus is what Dynatrace is actually contributing to the larger ecosystem in Kubernetes. That's why I'm talking mainly about Keptn, but really good question. So how does this benefit our Dynatrace community? What we are providing here is we're extending the observability in Kubernetes as it comes to deploying in Kubernetes, because this type of observability is currently not available. So Kubernetes is the future platform of choice, but it lacks core observability capabilities. That means if you want to get your DORA metrics, if you want to know when you deploy, who deploys, how long it takes to deploy, when things fail, currently you either need to do a lot of manual work in Kubernetes to build something like this yourself, or you need to extend all of your pipelines and get data out. So this is error prone and it just takes a lot of time. So what we're doing here, we are giving an additional data source to our Dynatrace customers to be granted. We are doing this through OpenTelemetry and Prometheus. That means every observability tool can take the raw data that we create here. Now for Dynatrace in particular, what we announced one of the things is the automation engine. So what we can do now is you can build in Dynatrace workflows that you can connect to this observability data. So what you can do is every time any of your teams is doing a deployment in an environment, you can automatically trigger a workflow to say, I want to notify people if things get deployed. I want to execute a workflow that asks people for permissions, that checks your SLOs, your error budgets, that makes sure that all of your external dependencies are there. So Dynatrace seeing everything in your environment from your Kubernetes to your mainframe, right? From your VMs to your machine to your serverless functions, we can use this data in combination with this here to really make sure that when your teams start deploying more frequently than before, that we automatically validate that before the deployment really happens, everything is green. And after your deployment happened, that everything is still green. And with everything green, I mean, are your users still able to access your application? Are they still converting as before? Are they having the same user experience? Because we have all of this data in Dynatrace, and what we announced at our conference just a couple of weeks ago, we have now automated workflows that you can trigger from any type of observability data, like a metric, like a trace, like a Kubernetes event, which we're providing here with Keptn. So Jamie, hopefully this answers a little bit of the question. Again, on purpose, today, I want to focus on the contribution that Dynatrace also does to the open source community, which will benefit everyone in the DevOps and everyone in the Kubernetes community.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute. Thank you so much, Andy. And listen, I'm not trying to kidnap the conversation. I'm literally trying to
The context, yeah.
Yeah, context and bigger picture, right? You know,
Yeah, exactly.
How do all the vendors and the customers in the community work together? So
Yeah,
thank you.
exactly.
Thank you for humoring me.
Yeah, no, it's good. All right. So this is what we set out from a Keptn perspective. This is really hopefully showing you what we do, because we're really solving a big problem that is there in Kubernetes. The observability of the deployments is just simply very hard to do. All right. We had a journey with Keptn. I want to go a little bit back. So some of you may have seen, it's funny, LinkedIn is an interesting tool. It always pops up with notifications on anniversaries. And 4 years ago, actually, I joined we started Keptn as an open source project. It was back in 2019, early 2019. Keptn itself has come a long way. We became a so-called cloud-native sandbox project in 2020 with a couple of core use cases. We then also became a so-called incubating project in cloud-native. This really shows the Kubernetes community that there is user adoption, that there's a certain level of quality. So we really matured. We released Keptn version 1 end of last year, and now we are in a Keptn 1.0 long-term support release cycle. With this Keptn version, and also Jamie, to your point again, when we created Keptn 4 years ago, we saw kind of like 3 major use cases that we implemented in open source. The first one was around quality gating, so leveraging observability data to automatically validate if a deployment is good or not. We also had use cases around automation to automate and orchestrate things like continuous delivery across multiple stages and auto remediation. These are now 3 core use cases. And Jamie, coming back to some of the announcements we made at Dynatrace, these are now 3 use cases that we also bring to our customers. So if you are Dynatrace customers, all of these core use cases are now just part of the Dynatrace platform, right? That's what it is. If you want quality gates, we call it now Site Reliability Guardian. If you want to have automation, any type of automation, it's called our workflow engine. And if you're for auto remediation, it's the same thing. You can build workflows now for this. So we started with open source, learned a lot, and brought it natively to our Dynatrace community.
And Andy, I'm from Red Hat.
Yeah.
I love hearing Dynatrace speak open source.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are we working with our partners in the open source community to develop these solutions? Look, with respect to our customers online here, paid for or not paid for, I think every single customer on the video chat is concerned about remediation, mean time to resolution, to all those things. How do we jointly, as a vendor community, communicate that back to the customer community?
Well, I think we're communicating this back. First of all, we're not doing this in isolation in a little basement somewhere without anybody knowing about this. We are heavily invested in all of the different open source initiatives, which means we are actually driving all of these through open standards. We're working very close with all of our partners, whether it's Red Hat, ServiceNow, some of the testing tool vendors, the CMDB vendors out there, the remediation vendors, right? We are very open. openly working with them, because in the end, we cannot do this alone, as I said, and every partner has a great piece to the puzzle. And therefore, Dynatrace plus Red Hat, Dynatrace plus whatever other tool partner you want to put there will bring in the end more value to our end users. So we are focusing on our strengths, on our core strengths. This is observability and data intelligence on the data we collect. And then we're integrating with all of these different vendors. And if possible, this is what we're driving through open standards like OpenTelemetry, Open Feature. There's many other open standards that we're driving and that we are promoting, because the more open standards we have, the easier it's also to build and maintain these integrations. Because think about it. We as a vendor, we have to build integrations with many different tools. Other vendors have to build integrations with many other different tools. If it's all proprietary protocols, it's going to be really a lot of effort to build and maintain these integrations. The more open standards we have for tool to tool and platform to platform and solution to solution integration, the easier it is for everyone. And the more security it is also for your end users, of our end users, that these integrations work and are well maintained.
Andre, Willie, Martin, and the rest of the gang online, is anybody having a hard time hiring 30-year-olds come and work in public sector for a pension?
Oh, you are asking pointed questions.
Sorry, I'll go back on mute and offline. But I know that that's the truth every day, because I live it every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when we talk to Andi, we talk to Sam, we talk to the rest of the Dynatrace and the future Red Hatters on the line, the reality is we're here to try and help you automate more of your business so that we don't have the gray-haired folks that look like me doing this until they're 104 years old. So, and I'm not kidding. And I'm the guys that laughed at that, they actually know I'm telling the truth. So
I'm 24, by the way. So
okay, that was good.
Not in the decimal system, though, right? All
Working
right.
hexadecimal.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So let's keep going. This is where Keptn started, and I want to highlight kind of like why we pivoted and why we built what I've showed you on the previous slide. And because what we have learned over the last couple of years, that all of the environments are going through a shift, right? In the recent past, especially cloud-native GitOps has shifted complexity, the way I explain it, from dev to ops. What does this mean? In a monolithic world, I see that a lot of developers had to figure out how to coordinate their code changes, whether it was Git, whether it was any other version code tool, right? They had to basically figure out how to merge all these changes into a big monolithic environment. And in order to figure out if this code was really compatible and integrating well, we invested a lot of time in very complex pipelines. Jenkins was a very popular and is still a very popular tool to do continuous integration. So basically, we put the complexity on the development side to figure out how to make a big application out of many different code changes, doing the validation and security checks in the pipeline, so that in the end, and I know I'm now overstating this, we made a quote-unquote simpler operations, because operations could deploy a ready set package, could observe it and could operate it on basically a well-defined app, also on well-defined infrastructure. I think this is the world that we lived in, and many are just transition it from this away to a world where I think what we're now doing is in the cloud-native world, right? We want to give autonomy to individual teams. That's why we are structuring teams based on services, where each individual team works on their individual service, meaning they're completely independent from each other to build their individual bucket. But however, what this means is that as you're moving these code changes from development over to production at some point in time, you need to figure out how do all of these systems, how do all of these services actually work together? Do they work together? When do we do the proper testing, the observability? When do we do security? And it seems we are right shifting the complexity to operations. The composition problem, like which services in which version combination running on which particular flavor of your cloud vendor, of your Kubernetes stack, of your cloud services, which one belong together? What is actually an app? How do we validate? How do we do security right? How do we do observability right? And I think while we shifted left and broke the monolith and gave autonomy and speed and velocity to the development teams, I think we made it really hard for operations to keep up with all this constant change. And then I see Andre nodding. And I think this, while it's a brave new world, it's a great new world, but we still need to figure things out. So this is what happened in the industry, right? That's the trend. This shift also was something that we heard for our Keptn V1. So our first version of Keptn, as I said, that we started 4 years ago. One of the things we learned where we were already on the right path back then is that a single pod, if you deploy a single pod, a single microservice, doesn't mean that the application is ready. And what we've built into Keptn V1 from the start was an approach, we call it SLO-based validation, SLO-based quality gates, to validate if a whole system actually works well. And as I said, we can pull in any type of observability data, and for our Dynatrace customers, this is also not part just of the core Dynatrace product. What we also learned are, and this is feedback that kind of goes back to my very beginning when I explained to you how Google's the blueprint for DORA. I had a couple of challenges out there, and I think we saw the same feedback in our community on Keptn. Because if you just introduce another tool that you need to integrate into all of your pipelines, it's a big hurdle, especially not if you're a single development job, but if you have 800 global development teams, like some of our customers, it's really hard to ask all of those teams, please integrate yet another tool into your pipeline. So we needed a zero integration approach. Also, as you probably know, in the Kubernetes world, everything should be configured through CRDs, custom resource definitions. In Keptn V1, when we started, we were not that mature yet, so we had our own configuration repositories. Also, open observability, right? Why store data in a proprietary format? Why store it like in Google's reference architecture in their own tables? And we did it in Keptn V1 in our own MongoDB. Why not use OpenTelemetry and Prometheus so you can just store it next to your observability data where you have all of the other data? And the last piece is application awareness. This is we break one big monolith application into services, but there's no standard right now to say which of the services actually make up one application. So this is a lot of feedback that we've received. And now coming to the solution. The solution to all of this is what we implemented in the current iteration of Keptn. We call it the Keptn Lifecycle Toolkit. It's part of the same Keptn project. But to give you a quick overview how this technically works. So if you have an application, and to take a simple example, you have an application, front-end, back-end, and storage service, right? If these are your 3 microservices, then by installing Keptn on your Kubernetes cluster, we are installing us as an operator. We are leveraging the Kubernetes webhooks, and we're actually extending the Kubernetes pod scheduler, which means what we can do with this on a pod level, on a microservice level, we get to know before a pod gets actually scheduled by Kubernetes. We know how long it takes for Kubernetes to deploy it, and we then also know when it's finished. So we get, first of all, the time span for every deployment, which means we can automatically create our metrics, and we can also create traces from start to end. What we also introduce is an application concept, because I told you this doesn't currently exist in Kubernetes. We're currently working with different special interest groups in the open source space to take our application definition and also push it into more of a standard. But with Keptn, you can define what is an application. So an application is these particular services, which means every time any of your development teams make a change to an application, whether you're deploying all services in the new version or just making one change, we automatically start tracing how long does it take to deploy the whole application, how long does it take to deploy the individual services within that application, and we can again create metrics, and we can also trace the whole thing. And now here's the cool next thing. What we do is we're creating not only metrics and traces, we're also creating events. And with the open source tool, with Keptn, we allow you to execute tasks for pre-deployment and post-deployment activities. So think about this. We can natively now in Kubernetes say, before anybody deploys into an environment, I want to first execute dependency checks, health checks. I want to double check if if my certificates are all there, if I have all of my approvals. As a post action, I could also do things like, hey, after the deployment, everything is green. I want to run some tests, or I want to make sure that I cleaned up anything from the previous version, or I want to evaluate if my SLOs are still green, if my user experience is still the same. And I know Jamie likes to bring in always the Dynatrace context. We are bringing this level of observability into the Dynatrace platform through open standards. And now with Dynatrace, we can now trigger workflows, not just individual tasks, but full workflows for pre and post deployment. You can really enforce policies. And these are all triggered from the data we capture from Kubernetes. And you don't need, and this is the important thing, you don't need to touch any of your pipelines to make this work.
Hang on, I saw Andre nod his head. He's one of the few that's
Well,
on the video.
I presume, Will, you could actually talk a little bit more about that, this part, but definitely we understand the pain.
Mm-hmm. We can, the cool thing with Andi here, Andre, sorry, that's going to be tough to say 17 times tonight, but the cool thing is we're just touching the surface, right? Like we're talking about end-to-end observability. We're talking about traces, metrics. We're talking about all the solutions that, Andi, over time, customers would typically run anywhere from 2 to 3 to 5 to 7 to maybe even upwards of 10 solutions, and at least getting it down to 1 or 2. And I don't typically join calls at 6 p.m. my time, but that's why I wanted to hear this, because this is one of the best evangelists going in the industry. And the fact that he's just not just tied to Dynatrace, he's actually speaking open source. That's so important, right? 20 years ago, open source was a joke, right? Today, open source is the industry standard.
Hey, Jamie, let's take some of the questions that are here, because
Sorry.
It's good. No, there's 2 questions that just came in. The first one, is there an overhead on the Kubernetes cluster? So we are installing it as a lightweight operator. That means, first of all, you can control on a namespace per namespace basis whether Keptn should be active or not. That's true with any operator, right? And then that means if you don't put the tags and labels on it to tell Keptn to do something, then nothing will happen. And there is really no real overhead, because the only thing we do is we just create some metrics and traces. So overhead is neglectable. Second question from Jamin: does Keptn operator work with OpenShift? Yes, it works with, right? Red Hat was initially promoting the operator concept and the operator framework. So the only thing what we have as a pre-requirement is Kubernetes 124 as a base platform version, because Kubernetes 124 provides a couple of the special webhooks we need in order to get into all of these details. Yeah. Cool. Hey, thanks for the questions. This is really great. Let's quickly go into, before coming to the live demo, how does this work? What do you need to really do in order to make this work? You need to install the Keptn itself, right? It's just a kubectl apply, and you install the operator. We also think have Helm charts now available. But if you want to enable any of your deployments with Keptn, the only thing you need to do is you're extending your existing CRDs, like a deployment CRDs, with some metadata where you can say, hey, by the way, this deployment, this microservice should be handled by Keptn, and here's some pre and post tasks and evaluations that should be executed. Now, what we can also do is, as I said, you can define so-called tasks. So you can actually say, what should Notify actually do? So we're providing here an easy way how, again, through CRDs, in a declarative way, can specify what action should be executed. Here we provide you with an option of writing TypeScript. We're using the so-called Dino runtime. It's a lightweight serverless runtime to execute tasks. And it means you write it once, let's say as an SRE or as a platform engineer, you write your different tasks, and then every development team can reference to these tasks, and they can then be executed pre or post deployment. We also have evaluations. That means you can, as I said, before or after deployment, you may want to evaluate, is the system even healthy, by looking at certain metrics? Do you have enough capacity? Or after a deployment, you want to figure out, are my SLOs still green? Is my user experience still green? So you can pull in data from your observability platform as part of the post-deployment validation. And last but not least, what I said, we are bringing application awareness to Kubernetes. That means you can also define the Keptn app as an object where you say, hey, I have an app, and this app contains actually these 3 services. And whenever then Keptn detects a change in the app, we can also execute pre and post deployment actions for the app itself. That means if you have this in place, the only thing you need to do is whenever your developers are making code changes and they get pushed to Kubernetes, either through your existing pipelines like Jenkins, if it does a kubectl apply, if you're using Argo, Flux, Azure DevOps, it doesn't matter. However you deploy on Kubernetes, all of a sudden Keptn comes in and will automatically start tracing the end-to-end lifecycle of your deployment. And this is now one of the traces that shows the end-to-end deployment lifecycle. And to give you a little bit more details, in case you've never seen a trace, it's like a tree, starting from the top where the initial request to Kubernetes comes in to make a change. The individual pieces here really are, you can specify pre-app checks. So they would show up here, how long they take. As I mentioned earlier, you can send notifications, you can ask for permissions and things like that. Then for every workload, for every microservice, we would then also have our pre-workload tasks. We would then have the actual deployment of that pod. So this is just the regular Kubernetes work that happens. And then after the deployment is finished, we have the post-workload task. And this would then repeat itself for every microservice, for every pod, for every workload that is part of your app definition. And in the end, you have your post-app tasks. All right, so this is what you get out of the box. The only thing you need to do is install Keptn, and then with whatever tool you deploy, you automatically get full deployment visibility. You get a trace, but you also get metrics, which means you get your DORA metrics fully automatically. Right? And for Argo especially, I want to now go quickly over to the live demo. Argo is a very prominent tool that we see out there. Argo and Flux is kind of the GitOps tools that are emerging. We also have some specific visualization of the work that Keptn is doing in their UI. So now let me quickly show you a live demo.
And Andrew, I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
So one of the tasks or pre-deployment tasks, I noticed over there, and the example was check error budget. So what does it do? What we'll do is actually checks error budget, and if the team is outside of the range, the deployment is going to be stopped, or it will just start measuring or adding to the error budget, or rather deducting from error budget if something goes wrong.
So I've worked with different organizations, and they treat the error budget in a different way. One of the things that I've seen pre-deployment, if the error budget is very low, they want to double check they want to do some additional testing maybe before the deployment actually happens, right? Because you want to know, we want to make sure if you're already very close on the error budget and you're deploying a new change, and that's going to be eating up all the rest of the error budget. You want to make it basically you're adding an additional gate, an additional check right in front of it. Also, the other thing what I've seen is people just really making sure that nobody deploys into an environment that is currently maybe under quarantine. And quarantine can also mean, hey, we're so close on the error budget, we cannot afford any downtime anymore, and therefore we're trading stability with new features. So this is what you can do.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And there's different use cases, and we can definitely chat more about other use cases and what people are doing out there. All right. So let me quickly go into my demo environment. So what I have here, right? This is my Argo. In case you have never seen Argo, Argo is for me, as I said, I would say I see most of the people using Argo CD these days for deployment. This is how Argo visualizes when an application gets deployed. My source code repository behind the scenes. This is my app. Very simple. I also have a tutorial, so in case you want to replay the whole demo that I have, and the demo, uses Argo, Prometheus, Grafana, Slack, and there's also a Dynatrace section in there in case you are a Dynatrace customer. Let me just put this into the chat here in case you want to replay this yourself. So what I have is I have my deployment, right? Like you have in any other Kubernetes deployment. So this is my simple node app. It's a single service. And the only thing you really need to add is, and I'm just zooming in here a little bit, because I know some of you, they say they're 24, but actually their eyesight might not be as like a 24-year-old anymore. Just making a... So I can, right, if I would change my deployment, I can, let's say I bump this up to version 4.0.2, and I also deploy a different version of my service, and I say I'm deploying version 4.0.2. That's it. I commit as a developer. And what happens now is, right, Argo is my deployment tool or my GitOps tool, which means Argo should validate that, hey, right, out of sync, I have automatic sync turned on. That means Argo is now deploying my changes. Now, this could be Argo, this could be Flux, this could be Jenkins, this could be GitLab, whatever tool you use. Yeah. In the back end, right, and that's the beautiful thing, is Keptn is automatically monitoring your deployments on Kubernetes. We're creating metrics and traces, and we're executing your pre and post deployment tasks. That means if I go back to my sample here, I have my Keptn tasks where I can, for instance, execute and push information over to Slack. This is just a function that I wrote where I'm pushing notifications to Slack. So you see this? This is my notify task. So I define this once, and then just through declaration on my deployment, I say I want to run notify pre and post task, which means if I did my job correctly, and if I walk over to my Slack, I now have an automated Slack integration. The beauty of this is I don't need to build any of this into my pipelines.
That's awesome.
I don't need to ask 500 developers to touch 500 pipelines and maintain them. I basically define a policy in Kubernetes, and Keptn takes care of it.
Andy, can I get a quick pause? Because I come from Red Hat. I've worked with the people at WorkSafe and many others on the line. This is so cool, man. And every time you speak, I got a question, right? So
that's what salespeople always do.
Nah, I've actually got a question that leads to, because we're using a lot of open source tools here, right? We're coordinating with a lot of open source tools, and it's not just Dynatrace that's got access and APIs to hundreds, if not thousands, of open source tool. It's the other groups that we're trying to do. And when we talk to Andre and Martin and Willie and the rest of the group here, the one thing that always comes back to us as salespeople is, how can my vendor community work together with stuff they sell, but also stuff that they can pull from the open source community to make my life easier. Andre, Willie, did I get that even close to correct?
You know, there's always one of the problems. So yes, absolutely.
Well, the
So,
thing is, right, I mean, I think I just showed you how we are working very closely, how we make it easy for the ecosystem to work together, because we are leveraging existing open source standards and frameworks that everybody has. Kubernetes, I mean, OpenTelemetry is the #1 CNCF project now, right? Prometheus is also, you know, for metrics has been the standard for collecting metrics. We are with Keptn driving new standards for application observability. With Open Feature, which is another framework, right, that we mentioned in the beginning, we are driving new standards for feature flag management for progressive delivery. So the only way we can, I think, succeed as a community is if we really figure out what are the individual building blocks and how can we define standards and easy interfaces so that all of the different tool vendors, partners can easily integrate without
integration.
Right, that's what it is. Yeah, exactly.
So as we move forward, March 21st, Dynatrace has an event to review some of the key features that Andi reviewed down at Steamworks. I think it starts, Sam, Oleg, Shiv, help me. I think it starts at 11:30. It's just to review the highlights of Perform. It's a lot, guys and gals. It's a ton, but the reality is we're one of the few, if not only, end-to-end solutions. And I don't see, other than Sam, maybe Andi, a bunch of young folk on the call. So how the heck are we going to navigate this world going forward? And the only way to navigate it is automation, right? So Sam, I know this was kind of your show, but I wanted to personally thank Andi. I can't imagine what time it is there now, but man, you are welcome in the wet coast. That's what we call the West Coast. Anytime, my friend, anytime.
Yeah.
Awesome presentation.
Thank you. I'm not done yet because somebody is interrupting me all the time and stealing my time.
You'll get used to it.
Yeah, I know. So I wanna just what I wanted to show you is this here, right? So we have I've refreshed my dashboard, so automatically Keptn has given me additional metrics like, hey, version number 4.2 was deployed. This is how long it took, right? I see this either in Dynatrace, but because it's open source and it's based on OpenTelemetry and Prometheus, I can see this in any type of tool, right? So here we have the same metrics in Grafana. I can also explore the distributed trace here of the deployment in Jaeger. I can see it in Dynatrace. I have everything here. And if I do one more check on my Slack, I now got the second Slack notification as well. Remember, because I said pre and post deploy, I want to have a task being executed. So there's much more I can do, but I know we are running out of time. But I want to quickly bring us home and to also have a little bit of time for questions in the end. So our intention, right, with this is that we are not just doing this for a single environment. Our intention is that you can use this across all of your environments. That means you install Keptn Dev Staging Prod. The only thing you really need to do is you need to basically tell Keptn for which apps, for which deployments, which tasks should be executed. And then when your developers make a code change and sync it out from whatever tool, we automatically start executing your pre-deployment tasks. Once this is done, we allow Kubernetes to deploy. We then do the post-deployment tasks. And what we are working on right now with a couple of our early adopters is that we can then promote and help you automatically promote all of these changes from one stage to the next. Not only promoting the container or the app, but also promoting that context, meaning, right, when we trace, if you've ever looked into distributed tracing, a trace always has a unique ID and that travels through it, through every node. And so what we are working on is to really give you an end-to-end trace from first commit all the way into production. So you can always say, why did this version end up in production? Where did it go through? Which pre and post deployment checks went on? Who approved it? And we do this all through open source standards. So the reason why we do this is, remember, we want to solve the problem that is still there to be solved. I think the community has made it easier for development to really crank out new innovation, make them more independent. We are solving the operational complexity with this, right? We're bringing the observability, we're bringing the automation, we're bringing the application awareness into your system so that development will become simpler and operations will become simpler. And what I've started in the beginning, right? We have, Keptn is one of our open source projects we are really proud of. We started with Keptn years ago, right? I mentioned 4 years ago. We've shifted to what we now call the Keptn Lifecycle Toolkit, which was really the stuff I've showed you today. And sometimes people ask, so what tool is right for me? I think if your tool stack is Kubernetes only, if you're using Argo, if you're using OpenTelemetry and GitOps and Flux, then go with KLT. And if you're not in that tool stack, if you're not on Kubernetes, if you just need a custom orchestration engine, then Keptn V1 might be the better start. But the good news is you can always ask us. We're always happy to give you advice based on understanding what your real problem is, and then we give you advice. And now the moment that everybody really has waited for, and because I think the only reason why most of you are here are really just to win the prizes. So the way this works, actually, let me see, there are more questions coming in. Andy, could you give a short explanation of how Keptn is different from other CI/CD control planes? So I don't want to compare Keptn with a CI tool. We don't want to compete with CI. CI is a solved problem, great tools out there. What we are doing is we are bringing orchestration that is necessary in continuous delivery core into Kubernetes. And I think this is the big difference. So you can obviously build your pre and post deployment checks into every pipeline, as I said, but we believe the pipeline is not the right place to put these things in because it's a lot of effort to maintain and update your pipelines. And you don't, right? Because what are the pipelines doing? They need to reach out to Kubernetes and say, did my deployment work? Is it everything healthy? And we just do this natively in Kubernetes. And what we also do with the tasks definitions, we have a separation of concerns, which means your SREs, your site reliability engineers, your platform engineers, you can define what tasks are available and which ones should be enforced as a policy when people deploy. And therefore, take your CI tools to build your containers, take your CD tools that deploy it on Kubernetes. And if you want to take the complexity out of your CD pipelines, then look into Keptn because we can do these checks natively in Kubernetes. Yeah. Hopefully this explains this one, just like the Slack example, to integrate your favorite tool in Keptn only requires a Keptn task. Yeah, thank you, Adam. By the way, Adam, thank you for being here. Right? Adam is not only the keynote speaker at GitOpsCon that is coming up in Vancouver in May, but he's also, you've contributed to so many great things in Keptn, and is just as active in the community as I am. How to define what services layers are in a given application scope. So Martin, we have the Keptn app object where you define your own CRD, a custom resource definition, where you say, I have an app and it and please watch out for these type of workloads that are part of that app. That means you can also have multiple apps that then also link to the same deployments, right? Because let's say if we have an authentication service that is shared, you can obviously do this as well. Does Keptn just work with Kubernetes? Yeah, Keptn Lifecycle Toolkit works with Kubernetes only because Keptn Lifecycle Toolkit is implemented as a Kubernetes operator. Yeah. So we really focused on this, right? With Keptn V1, as I mentioned, with Keptn V1, it was my kind of our first approach. This is it runs on Kubernetes, but can also orchestrate easily other things. But with Keptn Lifecycle Toolkit, we really focused on the problems in Kubernetes. Yeah, why do I need Keptn when I can do it on my? Yeah, of course. Really, you can use Keptn. You can do everything in your existing pipelines. If you want to do this, be my guest. And then if you have one pipeline, that's great. If you have two, it's great. If you have 200 pipelines, then you need to copy and paste and maintain all the pre and post deployment checks that are all the same anyway. It is job guarantee. You have a job for life because you can just maintain these pipelines.
Yeah, we only have 2,500 pipelines.
Say it again. How many?
2,500.
We should talk. Yeah. Jamin says Keptn Lifecycle Toolkit provides deployment policy enforcement. How does that work and what can it enforce? Jamin, what I mentioned, what you can do, what I explained also in the demo, you can define pre and post deployment tasks and evaluations that Keptn executes pre-deployment, which means before Kubernetes pod scheduler is actually deploying that pod, finding the right node to deploy it to, we inject ourselves into the pod scheduler, execute our tasks, and if those tasks fail because, hey, your check says there's not enough error budget, there's not enough resources, your external dependencies are not there, we actually tell Kubernetes, don't deploy that pod. And for post deployments, we just run tasks as well. And then we say, hey, this deployment actually is not healthy because while the pod is healthy, your SLOs are going through the roof or are failing, or your tests are failing. So that's what we're doing with the enforcement. It works through pre and post deployment tasks, and we are controlling then and feeding this back into the Kubernetes pod scheduler. Mm-hmm.
And just a related question to this one. From your demo, the configuration did not look overly complicated.
No.
But is there any support or any community that people could actually reach out or could actually learn and ask questions?
Yeah. So we have, if you go to, so I think Adam has already done a great job in posting some links and also Schiff, right? So Keptn SH is the website. We have slack.keptn.sh. That's our Keptn Slack channel. We started that Slack channel years ago, so we have a couple of thousand people on there. We are also active on the CNCF Slack. So CNCF itself has a Slack, and there we have a Keptn channel. Most of the activity, though, is on the Slack. Exactly.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. And for our Dynatrace customers, again, right, if anybody's out there from a Dynatrace perspective, everything we built in Keptn V1, what we learned over the last 4 years, has now been moved into the core Dynatrace platform, the quality gating, the automation. With Keptn Lifecycle Toolkit, we're now bringing more observability data, not only into Dynatrace, into all of your observability platforms, but if you have Dynatrace, you get this observability data, and then you can connect it with the workflows, with the quality gates in a fully automated and nicely one solution does it all for you. Cool. All right. Is it automatic or do you need to deploy something in Dynatrace? No, what you need to do is, so for Keptn is just an operator on Kubernetes. That's it. And Keptn creates OpenTelemetry and Prometheus data. And if you want to see this data in Dynatrace, you just install the Dynatrace One agent, and then you get this data in Dynatrace. And if you want to connect it with your automation workflows in Dynatrace, you can just define that for a particular event and piece of data that Keptn creates, a workflow should be executed, and you can do this in Dynatrace as well. But if you, what I said, If you want to get what I shown you today, install Keptn as an operator, and then send the observability data to wherever you want. And if you want to send it to Dynatrace, just install the one agent operator. And fully automatic. There's nothing else you need to do. Cool. All right. Quick question. So I have two time for the pop quiz. 2 Apple AirPods. Sam, I think you are the master of making the final decision on who actually, I think who's the fastest, right?
No, it wouldn't be my decision necessarily. So what I was going to say is for everyone to just pay attention to the chat and then ready to type. I would say whoever answers with the correct answer first will win. And I will send you my email address for you to share the direct mailing address where we can send you the prize, AirPod Pro. Does that make sense for everyone? I'll take pauses, go. So chat windows up. Andy, when you're ready, you can go.
Okay, perfect. So the first question is, what is the name of the CNCF open source project that standardizes observability for traces, metrics, and logs that Keptn uses? So what's the CNCF? Henry, that's super fast. I think we got a winner.
First winner.
I did not share my answers before, right? And I was that's good. Now, the second one is more Dynatrace related. And I mentioned it a couple of times, especially in the end, but what's the Dynatrace component called that is automatically collecting all of the open source data, all of the telemetry data from any of your environments? Jamin, one agent. Here we go. One agent to rule them all, one agent to monitor it all. Everything from browser to the mainframe, everything from the pod down to the node, down to the disk. We got it all. Cool.
That was easy. Yeah, Jamin and Henry, I sent you my email address, and if you can send me your mailing address, I'll ship you the AirPods.
Good job,
Congratulations.
guys.
Cool. And if you want to follow up later, right, as always, just feel free to connect on LinkedIn, Twitter, for both me and Keptn. And then, as I said, I think Adam is still on the call. He's from the Austria that has the kangaroos. and he will be in Vancouver. Adam, I think you're looking into flights right now, the second week of May, right? Or like time frame wise.
Yep, a few days before, a few days after CD and GitOps Con. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So Jamie, you should definitely leverage, Adam being there. And if I'm also going to make it, then obviously we do a big party.
I think we could make it a contest to see who could determine whose accent is whose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who has the kangaroos?
The Kangaroos versus the Austrians, with the Canadians going, I'm sorry, okay.
Hey.
No, listen, I mean, Sam, I don't want to steal your thunder because I'm going to pass the torch to you, but this was awesome. And please invite us again to help out, and vice versa. We will invite you to all the things we're doing, DevOps, DevSecOps, with public sector in British Columbia. It's so important. It's crazy, right? So thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much to all of you, and many thanks to Andreas. I really appreciate. I understand what a dedication it is to be what is now like 4:15 a.m. for Andreas.
Yeah, the question is, will I be able to fall back asleep now because I have to get up in 2 hours? Does it make sense, or shall I just
Coffee.
Fantastic presentation. Many thanks.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Very good.
It was really great. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Then
Thank you.
Good Nacht.
Gute Nacht.
Sam, any final
Good
words?
talk.
or-
Yeah.
Tschüss.
Tschüss.
Das Vidania. I don't know.
Das Vidania.
Now, seriously, if
care,
you have any, if you want to follow up, right here, there's all the details how you can follow up, and you have the local team as well. So
Excellent.
This is
If I
great.
can help
Thank
you.
you so much, sir.
bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Yeah.
Good
Thanks,
morning.
everyone. Bye. See you at CDCon.
Thanks.
Thanks, folks. Bye.